I was eyeing her capers actually. We make capers every year. We go out and pick them, which is a dangerous, there's thorns on caper bushes. But then we bring them home and pickle them.
Well, you're seeing all of this spring weather in Maine.
It looks remarkably like spring weather everywhere, except for maybe San Diego, where it rains and is sunny on the same time.
So here it is. You're missing snow. I mean, that would have been one thing that actually would have been fun is that.
Yeah.
You're a doctor? Andrew, my boss, Andrew. We have a place up at Sugarloaf, which is one of the mountains.
Okay.
Here. So all of this rain here is all snow up there. So we're going to get like over a foot of snow today.
Nice.
And so he said, I might try to play hooky tomorrow. Like, because there's just not many skiing, even everything was pretty snowy.
Right.
Such a long winter. So he was like, this might be the last time to actually get some.
Gotta take it when it's there.
Yep.
My parents had a condo in Maine for a while.
Okay.
And there were a couple of years when I was in my 20s that we were still skiing in May and June. It was
Well, the
crazy.
snowpack up there is crazy, right?
Yeah.
When you get
And I would imagine this year's probably also really good.
a ton.
I mean, yeah, they've had like almost atmospheric levels
Yeah.
in some areas, right? Exactly. 10, 15, 24 hours.
Yeah. Did you see any of Steve Pettis' he after February break, he went skiing out west for a week with like a friend. Just but like crazy like cat skiing or like not even like operated like snowpack rigs up there. Crazy. So yeah, just unbelievable. But just unbelievable amounts of snow.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to ski in the Austrian Alps one time. It was like 2 feet of powder, which I didn't actually know was a thing coming from California. We never had it. We skied so long that we couldn't tell the run from not.
Yeah.
There were a couple of times we skied straight into like the powder would be up to our waist, and we would ski straight into it.
Wow.
Let's go ski like in Israel up there. Sarah, ever been to Israel?
I have.
Do I have skiing? Like,
I don't know. There are mountains, certainly.
How do I know if this is on? The button doesn't change. Hello?
That's how you know.
Hello? Oh, it's still on. There, on Mount Ramon, there is, anybody who skis would say there's a mountain.
yeah.
But you're skiing. The better skiing is actually in Syria. It's a little complicated. But that's where the better mountains are.
Assyrians are not like the Jews, right?
It depends on who they are. You know, a lot of the populace is the populace. Israel has historically got a lot of
should be on. The farm that we work with is in Italy.
Those are Italian.
It's pretty good.
Just speak of that.
For the most, I mean, not fluently, but enough that I can get by. I can also correct this.
No, it's on. I'm getting texts of like, oh, we can't pick up the mic really well, and I'm like, yeah, it's because we haven't started yet.
And it's, oh, this is being broadcast.
Yes.
Perfect. Now we can get our listeners here. People are listening.
All right. I think we need to actually move the
How are
microphone
you?
to where people can hear you so that people know
I
we're
just
just.
turned away specifically
No,
because we were just chatting.
Yeah, but now I think we're gonna get started.
Okay.
So, maybe we can make some sort of formal, like, Brian,
That way we can also pull. One question.
Can we text Kate, who is currently on
Did you
the
put a max number of words?
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Rabbi, you try speaking into the mic now so that people can pick you up.
I'm trying speaking into the mic. You can hear me inside and outside? No, I meant outside live stream. I try to forget about the live stream. It's quite the spread outside.
I had to try one of those white strawberries.
So did I. Tastes remarkably like strawberries. Yep. Yeah, it was very cool. And a currant. I had to try a currant also. I'd never had a currant. Or not a not dried one, not a fresh one. Okay.
Oh, you have someone on the outside who's watching it.
Yeah, I'm hearing from both Steve Blattner and Kate, so.
How's that? I'll do that. Boker Tov. How you doing?
I'm very proud.
Nice to meet you. Rabbi Estrin. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I don't care what it looks like. Every other day here is sunny and bright.
I saw Friday. Friday was sunny and bright.
Yeah, that's.
Amazing sunrise.
We tried, we did this, so people can
Oh, because they don't have anything else to do.
can't go out and hike.
Yeah.
Smart man.
Yeah, I was thinking it this morning. I woke up and it was like torrential. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
And my poor dog was sitting there looking at me going, I need to go outside. But I don't want to go outside.
Right, right.
And she did. Yeah.
How's everyone doing today?
Okay.
Sherry says she can hear us.
Thanks, Sherry. What happened to the baby? Oh, oh nice. One end is dad, is the other end you? Is the other end you?
Hey, hey.
It works.
Should we start? Okay. Hello, everybody. And hello, everybody remote. Welcome to our Q&A with Rabbi Estrin. Just briefly, I'm John Galchinsky. I'm the president of the board. I want to thank Sarah and Brian and all the other, Joan and all the other members of the Rabbi Search Committee who, many of whom are here and who have just done a remarkable job putting together this visit, and just really appreciate all that great work. So the purpose of today is to just kind of open the floor to those who were able to join us here in person, and we have a few emailed in questions, which I can ask after. But just an opportunity to pose some questions to Rabbi Estrin and hear her responses. So I think what we'll do is Brian is going to walk around with the mic. To those who have a question, please just put your hand up and Brian will sort of go through. It's important to talk into the mic because those folks who are live streaming from home will not hear the questions if you ask them outside the microphone. So please do that.
Before any of us has any chance to ask a question, I'd like to have the rabbi tell us a little bit about herself and her feelings and thoughts about being a rabbi.
That's fantastic. That's a great idea. The comment was that before we get started with the Q&A, we'll have Rabbi Estrin just share some words with us. So we'll do it that way if that sounds okay to you.
Do I have a choice?
Well, maybe not. Okay, so we'll get started, and I'll turn the mic over to you.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's great. My thoughts, first of all, thank you for having me. I've been here since Thursday, so I've seen the rain, I've seen the sun. I'm still missing the snow, but whether you want that or not, you all are, okay? And it's been really lovely. It's been lovely to get to know each other. I think there are several things that prompted me to initially write when I read the survey, the questionnaire that's filled out by the community. One is your size. Like, I really like small communities. I like the small community feel. I like all of the benefits of participation and being able to hear people and meet people that come with smaller communities. And the fact that you were in Maine, which, I mean, it's Maine. I was born on literally the other corner of the United States, born and raised in San Diego. So being on this corner of the United States, or the continental United States, I apologize to anybody in Hawaii or Alaska, was kind of exciting. I specifically choose interim work. It works also well with the fact that I live in Israel full-time, so there's that benefit to it, but it's a different kind of rabbinic work. You kind of come in and really help communities dig and discover what are the values of the communities, what's worked in the past, but it's not so much about what's worked in the past, it's about why it's worked, or why it hasn't worked. And what are then the values under that? And what does that say about your community? It is really hard to come off of a long-term rabbi. You know, you're used to something for close to 30 years. And it's not good or bad, it's different. So one part of what I love to do is that questioning. And then one part, I call it stirring the pot, is you always do it that way? We're gonna do it this way. And the purpose of doing it this other way is really to see how it feels for you, or to show you perhaps something that you haven't seen. You know, an advantage of jumping around to a lot of communities is I see a lot of different models. And I can throw those models out to be seen by your community. All of this really is to do that same thing, to help you figure out who you are, what you want, and then what kind of a rabbi you want to help walk that path into the future with you. We're in a time that I see it as exceptionally exciting. There is a lot of change going on in Judaism right now, but it's hard too. We are moving out of Judaism, or we have moved out of Judaism of the 50s through the 80s. Somewhere in the 90s and early 2000s, we just kind of got stuck in wait, what are we doing? And now we're moving into a different kind of question of what does it mean to be Jewish? What does it mean to do Jewish community? And those are all questions that really should inform who you're looking for in a rabbi.
Great. Thank you. Dan, thanks for the suggestion that we start that way. So why don't we open up the floor to questions? I'm hoping that everyone here has a question for Rabbi Estrin. So should we just let hands go up, and Brian, you'll just find the first The first person? Okay, so anyone want to start? And
Introduce yourself when you ask a question.
yeah. Anyone, don't be shy. There's room here. All right. We love it.
As a fellow convert to Judaism, I'd love to hear about why you converted to Judaism.
It was home. Like, I was introduced to Judaism as a, I guess, 15-year-old. I started dating one of the 5 Jews in my graduating class of 1,000 people. So definitely that, minority among the majority. But it really felt like home the more I learned. I actually studied with a Chabad rabbi for 4 years and had a great experience with him. It was not the appropriate place for me to convert. I converted through the conservative movement. I love the intellectual integrity of Judaism. You can discuss and have your opinions until the cows come home. And Judaism says these and these are the words of the living Torah, the words of God. So we don't have to be in the same place. And I really love that. And I love that Judaism can say, you're supposed to do X. But I can argue with it all I want. Now, in the end, Judaism still says you're supposed to do X, and you can choose to do it or not, but there's that openness. In fact, from already 2,000 years ago, these conversations are being recorded in Talmud, and it's not just the answer, the right answer, but it's the minority opinion that's being recorded as well. And I think that says a lot about Judaism, that it's not that my answer is right, it means it's right for me in this place, in this time. And maybe tomorrow, or for somebody else, something else is the right answer. And it's very family-oriented, very communal, like I see community as family, extended family. So that was a big thing too.
Jerry Brown, longtime listener, first-time caller. I'm wondering about models you've seen. We have a very, very wide range of people on their journey within Judaism here, from people who are in the initial stages of exploring things. And I'm making broad generalizations about a community I don't know very well, but to people who probably are sitting in this room who, don't take this the wrong way, Rabbi, could probably run services in your absence and have done so, right? What are the models you've seen? We want to make all those folks feel welcome and not, feel I'm going to services, I don't really know what's going on. God forbid someone asks me a question, I won't know the answer. To people who, know the answers to the questions before they ask them. What are some of the models that you've seen in your travels that help us include all those folks and make them feel welcome wherever they are in their journey?
Great. So I think first I want to expand it past services. I don't think attendance at Shabbat services is the be-all and end-all for being Jewish. But so I'm going to expand your question a little bit to being Jewish. What does that mean? I believe that we are each on our own journey, and it is our journey. I personally find the guidelines and the structure of Judaism, of relatively traditional Judaism, to be appropriate for my journey and to be hugely helpful in my journey. But I think this is part of the conversation that's happening this decade and will continue to happen for the next decade or so, is what does it mean to be Jewish, to be part of a community? And with those answers, then how do we as leaders, whether that is the rabbi or the people leading services, and I never walk into a room and believe that I'm the smartest person in the room, because I'm not. I have a certain set of knowledge. Other people have that same knowledge and maybe more, and other people are doctors and lawyers and plumbers and things that I can't do either. But if we can together help create understanding about where people are and what they need, then we can come up with those answers of how to make people comfortable. An easy one is if I want to get kids in the building at 5:30 at night, then I better feed them, because parents don't want to have to then go home at 7 o'clock at night and feed their kids. So understanding that that is a need And maybe I can actually use that need to feed my children. And I don't know about anybody here, but I got really tired of cooking dinner every night. Like, that was not on my thing, especially when I am perfectly happy eating leftovers for 5 nights in a row and my children are not. So if I could go somewhere where they were gonna feed my kids, you just filled a need for me. If I can go somewhere where I'm gonna learn something that I wanna learn, you have filled a need. So what are those needs, what are those desires? And then how do we get to them? Knowing also that while we can build a very large tent, there are edges to that tent, and we can't serve everything. You know, there is a mission statement. Okay, there is a mission statement. And there are values of the community. Okay, and it can be a wonderful, wonderful idea, but if it doesn't fit the mission statement or the values, then you should put it to the side, because you really need to, if you want to go this direction, it's easier in the long run to stay here and not be moving all over the place.
So what we need to do is start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Exactly. That's right. Yes. Maslow is a master.
Thank you very much for your answer. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name's Leah Stearman. I have 3 kids.
There's one of them.
4. Miles is 6. My oldest one is 9. Miles and my oldest one are in the Temple not Hebrew school, sorry, right now. Family programming is super important to me. Looking at what's happening in college campuses now is absolutely devastating. And I think before we know it, these kids that are in Hebrew school now and attend services are going to be in college campus. And then in the next blink of the eye, they're going to be the adults in the room if October 7th happens again or any other anti-Semitism. So it's so important to me that we instill strong Jewish identities in our children now. And I'm curious about what your approach is to family programming. I know you briefly talked about getting kids into it, but a more just like general approach to it. And also Hebrew school to keep it fun and energized for these children. Thank you.
Beautiful. So I'm actually going to break that into 2 things, because I think you touched on 2 really important things. I love family programming. Like, I'm a big believer, if I bring the kids, the parents have to come. All right? If the kids are happy, the parents are happy. So I really tend to focus, if I want to do a program, on what's going to bring the kids, what do the kids want to do, and that's more about identity and belonging than it is about education. To me, education, you come in the back door with the education. It's not that it's not important, but there aren't a whole lot of kids in community who say, I want to go learn something. You know, they want to come play games, but they're doing that last night in a Jewish community, and that's huge. And I love running family education of all different kinds. I've been doing it for a lot of years. We'll just go with that, a lot of years. Vis-a-vis the Israel conversation and anti-Semitism and campuses, it's a tough one, and we have to start having the conversations while leaving room for disagreement. We don't have to all agree on the place of Israel in Judaism, but if we can build understanding and empathy for the people with whom we disagree, then we can continue sitting around the tables, because Israel is one piece of it. College campuses are tough, and I read a report, I don't know, 6 months ago or so, that really looked at college campuses for the last 80, 90 years, and how, you know, this is where kids are pushing back against the hierarchy and all of that, and they are often places of protest, and that's just the function of really finding who we are. There's a difference between pushing back, though, and some of the stories that are coming out that are stories of, they're incredibly painful and scary that are coming out. But I think if we can do education, if we can do conversation, and help to build Jews who are proud to be Jewish, And one of the things I talked about yesterday was the Esther story, and Esther changes her name to help be invisible in the larger community. And what is it like? What does it do to our souls when we feel like we have to be invisible? And the damage that does to all of us. Sorry, you're triggering me a little bit too. So, or not you, your question is triggering me a little bit as well. It's a big thing. And I think on that, it's really about conversation and opening those doors and saying, you're welcome at my table, let's talk, let's understand how to talk to each other and disagree and then go have dessert. Because everything's better with dessert, right?
I did want to also mention Rabbi Estrin visited with the KBE kids this morning, and so for anybody who has KBE kids, I encourage the kids to talk to you all, parents, and share their feedback with you all, and I would encourage you to talk to your kids about what Rabbi Estrin's visit was like if you want real-world experience of
I gave
her
them
interacting.
chocolate, so it should be good.
Rabbi Estrin, we've met. Delighted to have you here. I would like you to follow up on the last question. What kinds of family programming or children's programming would you want to do?
Okay. PJ Library. I think PJ Library is fantastic, is one thing. More specific, I do a values program that it deals with tzitzit and mitzvot, but the values under those mitzvot. And it's a family program basically saying, what are your top three values? And that's what it boils down into. And then everybody gets a white thread and 3 colored threads based on their values, and they make keychains. All right, and then you have this keychain to say, just like when we gather our tzitzit, they're supposed to represent the 613 mitzvot. Here's a keychain that represents my 3 values. And it can be done on the little kid level, and it can be done on a teenager level. Usually teenagers, I don't do it with the parents. That's because it's a different conversation when parents are not in the room. So that's one thing. When I ran a B'nai Mitzvah program, we did family education once a month through the entire year for 7th graders, that each month dealt with a different tradition, where the siddur come from, putting on tefillin, wearing a talit or not wearing, so that we were having conversations about, do you want to wear a talit or not? What kind of a talit if you do want to wear? We also made talitot. So I have a talit with barnyard animals on it that I made one year with the kids. Anything that, like the things that would come up in a bar bat mitzvah year, b'nai mitzvah year, but that they're family conversations. So that's a couple of examples that pop into mind.
Rabbi, I'm Gil Dixer, the other half. Going back to college campuses, how can we help the students on the college campuses, since there is a major group supported by Hamas on campus, spreading a lot of information and misinformation, and the kids today don't really have a full history of Israel and what's going on, and they only see bits and pieces, and that's all they're interested in, the younger generation. You know, I've seen Israel become a state. I remember as a kid with the Jewish Fund raising money for Israel. I go back to those days. But again, I keep hearing a lot of college kids are being influenced by this group whose the money is coming from Hamas. Yes, and all they see is the picture of today. Mm-hmm. How could we as a community influence or help move this to another level and show what's going on?
So the real answer is I don't know. That is the honest answer. I have ideas, and it's so painful. to take the kids who are on campus today, because the kids growing up are a different conversation. That's about providing them with the background and the knowledge and the education and the ability to have conversations. One of the things I think we need to look at on the college campuses is what's going on, not having to do with Israel, but this whole thing of minorities or the underdogs being looped together. And for many of these students, the Gazans are now the underdog. And it's just looped into all of these other underdog type concepts. Can we help to separate that? I don't know that there's a way for us to go onto any campus en masse and have this conversation. I think we have to do it one person at a time. You know, I want to go to some of these ceasefire it's called pro-Palestinian protests. I want to go and say, hey, I want a ceasefire too, because I want a ceasefire. I don't want it under the conditions that you're calling for, if you even understand what you're calling for, which is about education. I want a ceasefire. I want the Palestinians to have a great life. I want those things too. And sometimes I feel like if we can do it that way, first of all, there's that shock factor that can stop somebody. When Roe v. Wade fell, I went to some protests, I spoke at some protests, and the first thing I said was, you know, the very first mitzvah in Judaism is to have children, and I am pro-life. And then I continued on with the rest of that conversation of, I am also pro-woman. And now how do I bring those two together? But I felt like by starting, by kind of putting it out there, like, I'm on the same page as you. I want a ceasefire too. Now let's talk about the differences in where you come from it and where I come from it. So one by one. And there are people doing college campuses. So I feel like there are also people out there that have much better answers than I do to that.
My name is Ben. Claire. Big question. What made you want to be this, a rabbi, and what made you want to, hey, I want to be a rabbi?
It's a great question. My path in this world is to help other people do Jewish, whatever that means. And I was in education. I worked in a synagogue for 10 years doing education, b'nai mitzvah, adult education, informal education, and rabbi was kind of the next step in that process to be able to reach just a little bit further and open doors for people. Not that I have all the answers at all, but if I can walk with somebody, then I get to fulfill my soul work.
Hi, I'm Susie Schwartz. Little background, I grew up Reform, Judaism outside of Philadelphia, and when I came here, the religious observance in this synagogue was much more liberal in its services, length of services. I've loved being a member here and pretty much have been through Rabbi Braun, who I call high conservative. The Reform synagogue I grew up in, I would say, was high Reform, so I was used to a lot of Hebrew and things like that. I do feel, I'm married to somebody who grew up in this community, that there is a, and you touched on it, a broad range of people who, to be blunt, are not going to come on a Saturday morning for a 3.5-hour service, who, you know, so I think this is a good time for this, but I'm totally respectful of the people who feel that and want it. And Rabbi Braun has always said, you can come, don't worry, you can come late, which I do anyway, but, or leave early or whatever. But I think it's a good time for this congregation to have that discussion as to how, I think it would bring in a lot of, for instance, my friends who would come for, so is this part of your role as an interim rabbi to help this congregation have that kind of discussion?
Yes, the discussion. My role as an interim is not to come in and make changes. Of course, I have red lines, so if there's cooking going on Shabbat and then being served, that's a red line. I'm not okay with that. But part of the interim and the soul searching for the community is absolutely having those conversations and maybe even trying different models during this year to see it. You know, the conservative movement is always the logo, the watchword is tradition and change. And there's a conversation going on right now that really should be tradition and today. Because it's not about the tradition, it's not about the change, it's about where we meet in the middle. How do we take all of the amazing things that have been around and also look at where they belong today and kind of negotiate that space. So some will stay here, some will go there, and some may actually meet in the middle in a different way. I also am a big fan of one roof, many faiths, okay? Whether that's many Jewish faiths or everything else. Like shared spaces, let's have two minyanim. If there's really a group that want to have a strictly conservative traditional service, and another group that wants to have something much, by the way, 3.5 hours, I am not doing a 3.5 hour service. Like, whoa, no. I start on time, and my goal is 2.5 hours. Assuming there's no, like, bar mitzvahs, things like that will run. I have to put that caveat in there. Like, there are some times it runs later, but my goal is 2.5 hours. Please don't make me sit for 3.5 hours. But if there's a group that wants to do something else, I have done yoga for shacharit. Believe it or not, you can convert yoga positions into shacharit concepts type thing. I like to daven shacharit outside, which is always a challenge with live streaming. So, you know, you have to take that into account. But I love to do Friday night at the park when it's nice and sunny and Shabbat ends late. And those are all things that could be explored and discussed. And then my question is going to be, why do you want that? What is the value behind that? And, you know, you can get it this way. Can we also get it this way? What are different models for that?
Thanks. Barbara Lowenberg, Arlandi. So you've talked about a number of education. I'm a recent return. I left at 18, and I'm nowhere near that anymore, and I came back, and I know so little. So I'm really concerned and want a lot of adult education. There's a lot online, but I love this community and would love to see it happening here.
I love adult education. I love to teach. I mean, even when I'm not rabbiing officially, I teach. I do a lot of teaching online because that is part of that soul work of, you know, trying to spark ideas in other people, and mostly I teach the things that I love. You know, right now I teach a lot about Israel, but it's not just about Israel, it's about the connection between Israel and Judaism. So on Friday night I talked about, was it Friday? No, Saturday morning, I don't know when it was. I talked about the tzitzit and standing at the western wall, southwestern corner in Jerusalem, and why those two can be connected, and what's the additional layer that you can bring that. So I use Israel as a lens through which to see Judaism, traditions in Judaism, texts in Judaism. Musar, you know, I do Musar myself on a very low, simple level. But I try to integrate that and have conversations about that. I love adult ed. And it's amazing what's out there and available, but it's not the same as sitting for certain classes. You know, if I'm doing a straight up Israel lecture, I'm not sure that it matters if we're in person or online, because I'm doing it based on PowerPoint. But to do a Musar class in person versus online, or anything where I really want to build conversation and community, to do it in person is better. Not always possible, but in my opinion, better.
Good morning, my name's Andrew. My question is, we have a son that's being bar mitzvahed in the fall, and we were just trying to sort of understand your steps that you take with the student and how that integrates with the teacher and to have a successful weekend. Thank you.
Mazal tov, first of all. It's tough. I know that's tough, and on the parents and the kids. So first of all, know that I recognize that. In general, I'm going to find out what's already happening, and we're going to, whatever the plan is, again, unless for some reason it crosses a red line, which they're pretty, I have very few red lines. We're going to do whatever the plan is. And it's also something that, rather than waiting until July 1st, I'm going to talk to you and say, hey, can I start an email conversation or a Zoom conversation? Even if it's just 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there type thing, to start building a relationship and doing that. And then, depending on, first of all, what is fall? What months is fall? September, okay. Okay, so that's like right after, because in my mind, fall is November and December. And spring is January, February. So Southern California and Israel, you know. So really to try to make that as easy of a transition as possible. Also, I'm here for a year. You know, you guys have a very long relationship with Rabbi Braun. And she and I would have a conversation of best practices to do this. And if somebody is really attached and wants her to come and do part, and she's open to that type thing, that's a conversation that I would have with her. I don't have a problem with other rabbis doing things. Like, I'm perfectly happy to sit in the audience and daven as much as I'm perfectly happy to lead davening.
Hi, I'm Faye Spath, and I'm with Brielle Spath. She wants to know if you like chocolate.
Oh. It is a food group. Where is she? It's a food group, right? Chocolate? It's like the most important food group? Yeah, I do. I like dark chocolate.
She also wanted to know if you have a favorite song.
Ooh. Well, this might end the conversation, but I'm a country music person. And I apologize for anybody who doesn't like country music, but there is a song, I don't even know what it's called, but it's about flying like an eagle and living life to its fullest every day. And that is one of my favorite songs. It's not that one, but it's the same concept as that one, yes. Because it's country music. They just, you know, you give them back their truck, their wife, and their whatever it is, and dog, and there's nothing to sing about.
Hi, sorry, I've been in and out, so I'm not sure if this has been talked about, and if so, you can skip. But the city of Portland passed a resolution calling for a ceasefire. We have a Jewish musician coming to the State Theater this week, and the comments on the Instagram post have been turned off, and it's the only post in which that is the case. We've seen protests here, so there's quite a bit of quote-unquote activism. And I'm curious, like, as the interim rabbi, how do you see your role in a place like this, potentially bridging gaps, and what role do you see the temple playing in that as well?
So I think the last question I'm going to go to first, because that is a conversation in part with the community, with the leadership of the community, who I'm going to presume is representative or members of the community, and keeping that in mind. So that's one piece of it. One piece of it is I am Israeli, and I am unabashedly Israeli. That doesn't mean that I think Israel is perfect. It doesn't mean I don't think Israel could do things better. But I will always, well, I can't say always, because, you know, who knows what will happen in the future, but that is where I stand. I am also aware of the political restrictions when it comes to nonprofits. So these are kind of all pieces of background that goes into that conversation. I will go out and stand up against something that I think is wrong. We did talk about it a little bit, that opening conversations and sitting around the table, and I think the only way to do it right now is one person at a time. I don't think we can stand up as a community. All it's going to be is two groups yelling at each other. I also want a ceasefire. I want a ceasefire in a different way than those people are calling for a ceasefire. So having that conversation. I'm not going to get in somebody's face. You know, there are certain people that there's an opinion, and an opinion's not going to change, and it's just going to be the same conversation over and over again. But I believe that there are plenty of people who are open to the conversation as well. They may not change their minds, but I'm happy to sit and have the conversation based on my knowledge. And I'm not a politician in Israel. I don't know everything. And I'm also always very, try to be very conscientious about saying this is my opinion as a X.
John, could you take the microphone closer to her?
Yes.
Thank you.
Other question?
Hi, good morning. My name is Barbara. We met during the menu this morning. Hate to admit it, but I have been part of this temple since its inception. Okay, I've gone through and been exposed to the leadership of at least 6 rabbis. My husband and I both agree that one of the things that brings us to a service, I'm not talking about a bar mitzvah or anything, but a service, whether it's a Saturday morning, which is rare for him. He was also brought up Reform. But to a service is leaving with a memory, and that memory is made by the words of the rabbi during his or her sermon. How do you do that to keep the congregation interested, away from texting, away from sleeping? What is the magic that you have that would do that for this congregation? Thank you.
Well, I don't have any magic. I'm okay with sleeping as long as there's no snoring. My goal is always to leave with a question or something to chew on, that I leave you with something to chew on. And oftentimes I give a proper sermon, I also like to do conversation. Like I want to have a little bit back and forth. I also am a big fan of random, oh, this just popped into my head. Let's talk about this word, because this word has so much depth to it. And if I can, through that little 1.5 minute thing, bring a deeper understanding to a prayer, or a new understanding, or a renewed understanding, I think that's a beautiful thing. So I'm very casual, and also if there's a question, great, ask me a question. I'm willing to stop most places. I won't stop in the middle of the Amidah, but and have a little bit of a conversation. But I always want to chew on something based on a new understanding or something that comes up. I am not David Wolpe. I am not David Wolpe, who is like a premier sermon writer. you know, there are some people that is what they do, and you will walk out knowing somebody, like gnawing on something. But I try.
Yeah, so I have a question. What area of Tikkun Olam or social action most resonates with you? Or areas, perhaps?
Interesting question. You know, the past 4 months in Israel have been so different. And we've been in the fields or in these civilian command centers, which is basically somebody calls and needs something and you figure out how to provide it for them. And working with refugees. Or displaced people, because technically refugees is only when you're outside your borders. And I think one of the things that has really shown me is the power of standing together. Prior to October 7th, there were all of these anti-Supreme Court change protests going on. And one of the things that was remarkable is everybody standing on the street, usually Saturday nights, were against the changes that were happening. Not necessarily changes need to happen, but the fullness with which this overhaul was happening, if that makes sense. Like, we may all agree that the Supreme Court has a little bit of a loose definition of reasonableness, and maybe that needs to be tightened up again a bit. But to do 53 things in one law is not okay. And you would stand there, and there would be all of these banners from people who would never stand together. Pro-peace, anti-peace, women only, not so much ultra-Orthodox, but certainly Orthodox, close things on Shabbat, open things on Shabbat, all standing together. And then on October 8th, it was gone. Now, it's still there, it's underneath, we will go back to it. But all of those groups then pivoted to take care of the country and to do what needed to be done right now, and we put that aside. So for me, Tikkun Olam is bringing people of diverse backgrounds and abilities and needs together to work together to fulfill what they think needs to be done. If that's a homelessness issue, if that's an environmental issue, whatever. I also think those are great ways to bring people into community. If you have Jews in the community who are really into communal gardening and CSAs and all of that, and they're not interested in services, they're not interested in education or anything else, so let's go talk to them about how can you make this a piece that we can do together. To me, Jews doing together is Judaism. Even if you're doing something that doesn't seem Jewish because it hasn't fallen under the rubric of the 50s through the 90s. You know, helping the homeless is Judaism. If I can give you the language of Judaism to go with that, great, that's a bonus. Now, the language of Judaism to go with environmental work, that's a bonus. But Jews doing things together, I think, is a beautiful thing too.
Hi, Rabbi, I'm Matt Zucker, we've met. I'm sure it's a hard question to answer, but what parsha or bit of Torah resonates with you most?
Beshalach, crossing the Red Sea. It was the very first thing I ever read. My middle name is Miriam, so it resonates that way. But it's got all of these themes of walking out of difficulty and into more difficulty, because if you think about it, they might go from Egypt to freedom, but freedom's not so easy. Of the power of God, of song. So yeah, that was an easy one, actually. Thank you. I appreciate an easy answer once in a while. By the way, my answer is usually 42. See, I just dated a certain group.
Any other questions, thoughts? Okay.
Hi, my name is Margie Goldberg, and you mentioned that you have red lines. What are your red lines?
Cooking on Shabbat and serving it in the synagogue. The conservative movement has red lines that are placed on me. Whether I agree with them or not, in order to maintain my membership. And the irony is there's one of them that is so ridiculous that I don't even remember what it is. But one is if I perform a ceremony for two people who have been previously married, there needs to be a get, a divorce paper. And the other, which is a huge struggle with me, is right now I cannot perform intermarriages. And that tears my heart apart because I think it's wrong. And it's under discussion right now. And I don't know where it's going to be and what's going to happen with that one, but that's a red line that's imposed upon me. So, aside from that, nothing else comes to mind. I won't walk on my hands, or, that's...
Hi, I'm Jackie Parker. My wife and I belong to Bethel, and she is Catholic. And being that you touched upon it, I just wanted to know a little bit more about how you welcome interfaith relationships and families into the community.
I love it. Great. The reality is that sometimes I have to be told, no, you can't give them an aliyah because they're not Jewish. I don't care. If you want to be here and be part of community, yes, there are some halachic limitations. I guess that's a red line. While and again, I'm not here to make changes, and I don't know what the synagogue does right now. So keeping that in mind, and I'm not going to upturn everything. If there's a bar bat mitzvah, I am perfectly okay having a non-Jewish spouse come up with the Jewish spouse to stand there when their child reads Torah, and work within those guidelines to not necessarily, they're not called to the Torah, but to do that. Usually I don't even know who's Jewish and who's not Jewish, because unless there's a reason for me to need to have a conversation, I don't care. And particularly Catholicism, let's think about it. Catholicism and Judaism, aside from the Jesus thing, they're the same conversation. So that one's really easy. We think the same, but at least traditional Judaism and traditional Catholicism. My father's a fallen Catholic, is what he calls himself. There's more similarities than there are. I always tell tourists when we tour the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is the church that sits on where tradition says that Jesus was crucified and later buried, we get to the burial cave, and I say, now this is where Judaism and Christianity separates. Not the previous 30 or whatever number of years that Jesus lived. That's all the same story. Right here with that closed door, what happened when that door opened? That's where the two separate. Was Jesus there? Was his body there? Or not? And that's where fact and faith separate, or history and faith separate. Okay. He's so hungry over here.
I'm not. I don't know. My stomach's just growling.
Sorry, I just totally.
It's like a little piece of bagel still sitting behind me. I don't know. Hopefully the mic didn't pick that up.
No, but I just told everybody.
So one thing that you mentioned about your role as an interim would be trying out new ways of doing things. How would you work with people who are really resistant to that kind of change?
Great question. I think that's part of the conversation. First of all, it's going to depend on what it is. But what is that resistance from? A lot of times we are resistant to things because we're afraid. We're afraid we're going to get left behind. We're afraid we're not going to understand. We're not going to fit in. Whatever it is, it's fear. And if you can identify, if it is fear, and you can identify where that fear comes from, then you can have a conversation about that. Doesn't mean it's going to change it. But at least I can know if we're talking about, we're going to go from an annual Torah reading to a triennial Torah reading. And the fear is that people aren't going to know as much Torah. So, okay, we can go to a triennial, but there are other ways of addressing that fear. You know, maybe the Torah reading is the first year of the reading, but the sermon is the second year of the reading. Or there's a little bit of education afterwards, or something like that. So by understanding that, when you're talking about somebody that just is not interested in change, okay, they're just not interested in change. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the community has to get stuck by that person. It means you have to respect that person and respect their attachment and their desire for whatever that is. But sometimes you just have to take another step. And sometimes you don't. You know, it's conversation. Really, that's my real answer, is not 42, it's about conversation. Let's talk about it.
So I have another question. As I think you know from conversations we've had, we are not only undergoing a search for an interim rabbi this year, but we are searching for a new executive director as well as an education director. So there's going to be a lot of change this fall, I'll use that in quotes, this summer, this fall, for Temple Bethel. So do you see that as a positive thing or a challenge? And if so, how would you help us navigate all those pieces?
So the short answer is yes. All of the above. And a little bit longer answer is, yeah, been there, done that. I walked into a synagogue where I was the interim. The front office had changed. There was a new president with no institutional knowledge. The building manager changed, which is actually a huge challenge. And there was one other, and the ed director left on September 1st. So yeah, been there, done that. I think it's really tough, but institutional knowledge you have. It's not only held by your staff, it's held by your community. So being able to tap into that through community. And look, most staff, unless they're leaving for bad reasons, and it doesn't sound like any of your staff is leaving because you kicked them out, are willing to take phone calls and be a resource for that. It's also an exciting change because, well, the office manager where I started when I was in interim, she was amazing and fantastic and lovely and 87 and still used a typewriter. So we got rid of the typewriter and things moved much more quickly in the office, and she was able to add all of these other jobs because she wasn't literally typing things. She typed really fast, but still. So sometimes when you dump everything and you start new, because it is missing that, you get to start it from the ground up. Or know that, oh, this is how it was done, but yet, no, we're not going to do that anymore. And I did actually ask in the office, Grace. Mm-hmm. Grace said something about typing up the yard site list. And I'm like, wait, you don't have a typewriter in here, do you?
There's probably one back there.
So as long as it's electric and not manual, we're okay.
Yeah, well, for as much as there's a lot changing, there's a lot that's not changing as well. And the board and so much of our staff will be a consistent sort of institutional continuation. And I say that for the sake of everyone in the room, that it's not a complete sort of, new day, top to bottom. So we're fortunate to have that continuity.
Yeah.
I've asked a question.
We'll allow it.
All right, thank you. On redirect. We have a unique opportunity, given your background and given where we are, to have the kinds of discussions about what's happened since October 7th, but also the day after. What does a solution look like? Where do we go? What does Israel stand for? At the risk of costing you the position, by putting you on the record for what you're going to do.
Fair enough.
Your association with Israel and some of the resources we have here give us the opportunity for an internal discussion and dialogue. And I'm sure that within this congregation there's a variety of views about what the day after looks like. Getting as specific as you want, what would that series of discussions look like, and how would we do it without tearing ourselves apart?
Huge, huge, and we do it through empathy. If we can have a conversation and have empathy, then we can have a conversation. I have done 3 different 5-part series that were part education and part conversation. October, November, or into December, like at the very beginning, that really gave, who is Hamas? What is the history of Gaza? Let's start with the basics and get that information out. What does it mean to be a just war and to be a war fought justly? Because they're not the same thing, biblically and today, in today's world, which they're pretty similar. And where does Israel fall on that continuum? Or where do I think Israel falls on that continuum based on my knowledge? Because again, one person, one opinion. I'm willing to sit at the table and have a conversation with somebody who wants to have a conversation, even if I vehemently disagree with them. When it gets to this point where we're just saying the same thing over and over again, we both have better things to do than that. I think education is part of it, understanding it. Sharing. One of the things that the solidarity trips are doing right now really well is hearing stories. Now, they are hearing Israeli stories. Israelis are still, and myself included, are still struggling to have bandwidth to really look at the day after in a humane, conscientious way. Because we are still burying our kids, and we're still not in our homes and that type of thing. So it's very hard for me to look at the day after. There's also an intellectual part of it. I know where I was when there was a ceasefire on October 6th, and I choose that language very, very specifically. That ceasefire was broken by Hamas on October 7th. Where I was the end of October 7th, intellectually, and what I think the future needs to hold, was not the same as it was October 6th. I am moving closer to that, to what it was before. But I'm not sure that I'm ready to have that conversation about the day after until I want to be back where I was before. I believed in a 2-state solution. I didn't know what that was going to look like. I don't know how we get there, but I do believe in a 2-state solution. And I want to get there again before I really start saying, okay, let's talk, because I don't want to talk from where I am right now. I don't want to be here, but I am. So that is totally out there and honest.
So this is sort of a 2-part question. We had a question come in advance that was, would you perform gay marriages? And then I'd like to ask a bit more broadly. We've done work with Keshet to make ourselves a more inclusive community, and I would be interested in your approach to working with people with diverse gender and sexual identities who are currently very welcome members of our community.
Well, the short answer is I'm married to a woman, so that pretty much puts all of those out there. Again, a person is a person. It doesn't really matter to me what pronouns you use, who you sleep with, where you're going, where you've come from. What matters to me is that you're a good person, and I want to know who that person is. I think it's actually amazing. I mean, at one of our early conversations, I was like, wow, you've done Keshet. That's fantastic. That says a lot about your community, that you've already taken, in fact, as a whole, your community has almost started the process of what I would often do as an interim rabbi. Like, you have started some of these conversations, or even finished some of these conversations, and that was, seeing that on the questionnaire was a really like, wow, they're there, they're willing to do the hard work, because sometimes it is hard work, and sometimes it's upsetting, and sometimes it's scary, but I believe that it can be walked together. And I do make mistakes, and sometimes people get really pissy at me. And sometimes I go into the board meeting, I'm like, remember you hired me to tell you the hard things? Let me tell you something. And as you can see, this is what you get. Like,
Well, I guess we'll, unless anyone else has any questions. Oh. Okay.
Nice person. Just in general life, it's after October 7th, it's also after the pandemic, and it's also just being a person in the world today about balancing your life. And obviously coming into this position would be a lot, because there's a lot going on. There's visiting sick people, and there's welcoming new babies, and leading Torah services, and all of that. So how do you balance in your day, and as you start such a big task of leading a congregation, how do you keep balance in your life and encourage congregants to keep balance in theirs?
I like the last part of that question. So the advantage for you guys is that I come without a family, and I'm only here for 1 year, so I can maintain a different level than a long-term rabbi can. You know, if a rabbi is going to give 150%, I can give 160%, because I don't have to maintain it long-term. But that is actually one of the conversations. Rabbis coming out today are not the rabbis that were graduated 30 years ago. They are not going to ignore their families, and this becomes their building. And for some communities, allowing rabbis to have a personal life is really new for them. So that's actually a conversation to be had, is, you know, you may have less time. Doesn't mean you're going to have less energy and thought and everything, but you may get less time. I'm an outdoor person. Like, if it's sunny, I'm sorry, I'm canceling. No, I won't cancel it. But I might call you and say, hey, do you want to meet in the park so we can walk? I don't know. I don't really have a challenge setting personal limits. And it's possible because I have always been in a job that was not 9 to 5. I had a 9 to 5 job for 2 weeks, and then I gave notice. I lasted 4 weeks. That was, I was like, wow, I'm out of here. I can't do this. I put my heart and soul into it, but I'm also very conscious. It was about taking care of me. So I think part of that is modeling. I think it's a good, you know, anytime we see something that's healthy, if we see it, it kind of enters our mind. And again, talking about it, like, are you sure you really want to take that on? You're already on 3 committees. Do you want to be on a 4th? And there's another part of that. Do we want you to be on a 4th? Because that's one voice being heard in 4 different places. And then diversity is better for that. I also, bringing kids onto the Bima, to me that makes it not work, and that makes it play. I don't know if you saw when your baby, whose baby was it? That just was, I was like, okay, hand them over. You know, we can play and be together. To me, is not necessarily work. Like going for a walk and trying to avoid shul stuff is personal time as well. But thank you for caring about your rabbi as well as yourself.
Rabbi, I am concerned about the fate of the Morning Minion, which is supported by maybe 20 people, both virtually and in person. What could you do to help bolster this very important part of religious observation in terms of your own personal commitment to attend from time to time? Because it's a way of life that we who support it feel will vanish in the next 10 to 20 years.
It's a great question. Off the top of my head, there are only two things that I think I can do. One is make a commitment to show up on it from time to time, your words. And the other is to open up a question of style and resources. There are so many things going on in our world today, and I think that's one of the major killers of Morning Million, is people are just so busy. And is the current style, and I went this morning, it's basically a traditional service, straight up davening, a lot of English, which was interesting. I was trying to do the responsive reading. I'm like, I haven't seen thy, or some of these words in a very long time. The other thing is, where are your resources? Are we using all the resources that are available? And this is a much bigger thing. If Temple Bethel has an introduction to Judaism class, and Beth Am has an introduction to Judaism class, is there really so much a difference? Can that be combined to create a larger community and then free up somebody to teach something else? So similarly, if there's another shul with a morning minyan, now minyan is, it's trickier than a class, I granted that. But if there are 3 minyans that are not making minyan, are not making 10, can we bring them together and utilize the larger community? What are the shared resources that exist in this community that are not being tapped? Whether that's a financial shared resource or a person shared resource, or if you've got, and I don't know if this is true, but somebody said that Beth Am has more kids and you have more finances. Those are 2 resources. Can you bring those resources together to be stronger all the way around? If that's an example, that was an example actually where I was, where they joined the school. One synagogue had more money and the other synagogue had more kids. In fact, they had like 90% of the kids. So it was good for everybody. Minyan's a tough one in today's world, but I'm happy to explore it. That was a very long answer to your short question.
Okay. Well, I think we will wrap things up. Thank you for being here and for fielding the conversation here that we had. And thanks to everyone for coming out, enjoying some bagels, and having a time with Rabbi Estrin. I think we'll be here for a little bit longer, so if you have any questions you didn't feel comfortable asking to the group, I'll volunteer you to be able to answer. Anything else?
So later this afternoon, an email will come out from the search committee that will have a form that people can fill out to give feedback on Rabbi Estrin, and that will be open through Thursday? Through Thursday. Thursday nights. Please, we really value your feedback on Rabbi Estrin's visit. I believe there will also be paper copies available in the office. And then look for additional emails coming out from the search committee either end of this week or beginning of next week to talk about one additional candidate visit.
Great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. It's lovely to see some new faces, too.